A king with a crown, but no brain. A queen with diamonds, but no heart. And a people with only hunger and a guillotine. The king, the queen, and the hungry people. Once upon a time, France was ruled by a kind but weak king named Louis XVI and his fancy, out-of-touch queen, Marie Antoinette. The country was broke. They had spent a fortune helping America win its revolution. French society was split into three groups, called estates. The first estate priests and second estate nobles made up only 3% of the people, but they owned most of the land and paid almost no taxes. The third estate, everyone else, farmers, shopkeepers, poor workers, was 97% of France. They paid every tax imaginable, and they were starving. A terrible famine hit. Bread was scarce. While ordinary people fought over scraps, the royal palace threw lavish parties. The people had had enough. The storming of the Bastille, the 14th of July 1789, on a hot summer morning, a furious crowd gathered in Paris. Armed with pitchforks, axes, and stolen muskets, they marched toward the Bastille, a massive stone prison and a symbol of the king's absolute power. Down with the Bastille! Give us liberty! The governor of the prison ordered his soldiers to fire. People fell dead. But the mob didn't stop. They broke through the gates, freed the handful of prisoners inside, and chopped off the governor's head, parading it on a pike. When the king heard the news, he asked, "Is this a revolt?" A courtier replied, "No, sire. It's a revolution. Rights, riots, and the March of the Women." The revolutionaries wrote the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, a bold promise that all men were born free and equal. It sounded beautiful on paper, but bread was still scarce. One October day, thousands of women, many of them armed with knives and broomsticks, marched 12 miles from Paris to the king's palace at Versailles. They stormed the building, screaming for bread. They dragged the king and queen back to Paris as prisoners of the revolution. From then on, the king was a puppet. The Reign of Terror. Kill or be killed. The revolution grew more radical. A hardcore group called the Jacobins, led by a cold lawyer named Maximilien Robespierre, seized power. Robespierre believed that to create a republic of virtue, you needed terror. Terror without virtue is murderous. Virtue without terror is helpless, he said. That was his excuse for the guillotine, a swift, brutal beheading machine. Day after day, tumbrils, carts, rolled through Paris, packed with condemned men, women, and even children. The blade fell, heads rolled into baskets. King Louis XVI lost his head. So did Marie Antoinette. So did thousands of ordinary people who said the wrong thing. Then Robespierre started killing his own friends. They got scared. They turned on him. In July 1794, Robespierre himself was dragged to the guillotine. The crowd cheered as the blade dropped. The terror was over. But France was exhausted and broke. A tiny general with a giant ambition. After the terror, a corrupt 5-man committee called the Directory ran France. They were weak, unpopular, and losing wars. Enter Napoleon Bonaparte, a short, fierce general from the island of Corsica. He was not tall, but he had a giant ego and a brilliant military mind. He won stunning victories in Italy and Egypt. The people loved him. In 1799, Napoleon staged a coup, walked into the legislature with grenadiers, and declared himself first consul, effectively the dictator of France. Then, in 1804, he crowned himself emperor. He even grabbed the crown from the Pope's hands and put it on his own head to show he owed no one his power. The reforms and the code. Napoleon wasn't just a fighter, he was a builder. He created the Napoleonic Code, a new legal system that said, all men are equal before the law. Your job depends on talent, not birth. Religious freedom is allowed. But the code also took away rights from women, they were legally under their husbands, and brought back slavery in French colonies. Still, the code was so good that many countries copied it. Napoleon also built roads, started a national bank, and created public high schools called lycees. 7. Conquering Europe and the Russian disaster. Napoleon's army smashed Austria, Prussia, and Spain. Only Britain and Russia stood in his way. To crush Britain, he tried a blockade called the Continental System. It failed. Then he made a fatal mistake. He invaded Russia in 1812. He marched 600,000 soldiers into the frozen East. The Russians didn't fight a big battle. Instead, they retreated and burned everything behind them: crops, villages, haystacks. The French found nothing to eat. When Napoleon reached Moscow, the city was on fire. He waited for surrender. It never came. Winter arrived. Starving and freezing, the French army limped back home. Only 40,000 soldiers survived. The giant army was gone. Napoleon's enemies smelled blood. Exile to Elba. And the 100 Days. In 1814, the Allied armies captured Paris. Napoleon was forced to give up his throne. They exiled him to a tiny island called Elba off the coast of Italy. He was allowed to keep a small palace and a few soldiers. But Napoleon was not done. In February 1815, he snuck onto a ship, landed in France and marched toward Paris. The king sent soldiers to arrest him. Napoleon walked up to them, opened his coat and shouted, "If any of you will shoot your emperor, here I am." No one fired. They shouted, "Long live the emperor!" and joined him. He ruled France again for 100 days, but the powers of Europe united against him one last time. The final defeat. On the 18th of June 1815, near a small Belgian village called Waterloo, Napoleon fought the British army led by the Duke of Wellington. All day the battle raged. French cavalry charged British squares. Cannons roared. Then, late in the afternoon, the Prussian army arrived to help the British. Napoleon's exhausted troops broke and ran. The battle was lost forever. Napoleon rode from the field, defeated. He tried to escape to America, but British warships blocked the way. Helena, the lonely end. This time, the victors weren't taking chances. They exiled Napoleon to Saint Helena, a tiny volcanic rock in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean, 1,200 miles from anywhere. There, in a damp, rat-infested house, the former emperor of Europe spent his last years. He dictated his memoirs, argued with his jailers, and grew fat and ill. On the 5th of May 1821, Napoleon Bonaparte died. His last word was, "France." Later, his body was brought back to Paris and placed in a giant golden tomb under a majestic dome. Millions come to see it. Epilogue. What the story left behind. The French Revolution and Napoleon changed the world forever. Feudalism died. No more serfs, no more noble privileges. Nationalism was born. People began to feel they belonged to a nation, not just a king. The Napoleonic Code became the foundation of law in dozens of countries. Modern war began. Huge citizen armies fighting for ideas, not small royal armies. Napoleon lost his final battle, but he won the war of ideas. When you see liberty, equality and justice written anywhere in the world, you're seeing the ghost of the French Revolution.